Stolen a lot of my thunder there with all the being a local boy. I was thinking though that we should be rewarding those who come on the shortest, lowest impact trip, not necessarily the furthest speaking today. Contemplating that on my walk in this morning. So thank you for the invite to come here. It's quite exciting for me as having that connection to Peterborough and the work they've been doing on environment capital and the leadership they've been pushing in that direction and in through the Future Cities programme, to be here and kind of see that continued, and to hear from Councillor Hiller, who was actually my portfolio holder when I was working at the transport team, still central to what the city wants to do as it goes forward. So that kind of convoluted background, InnovateUK employee, seconded into KTN, now leading on the Smart Specialisation Hub, this kind of classic public sector career that I'm currently on. The hub itself is a project delivered to act as an independent organisation for government, which is funded to provide objective analysis to support local activities and the understanding of local innovation capabilities in particular, and to support the principles of smart specialisation. This is, again, classic public sector. It's quite convoluted, but we're funded by a combination of Innovate and BAYS, and delivered by the Knowledge Transfer Network and the National Centre for Universities of Business. And what we look to do is triangulate where those strengths are locally and trying to reveal where there are new capabilities. So one of the important things about smart specialisation is understanding not only where you have your comparative advantage, but how you lever that for new opportunities. And circular economy really is a central opportunity in that space. The hub, broadly speaking, does two things. It offers advice, and we maintain an observatory. We're very interested in supporting evidence-based, which is why we've worked with OP on this circular economy agenda. And we provided this idea around the observatory to, again, understand where there are local capabilities and try to understand better what's happening where. So if you go to our website, and you'll see that on the slides, you'll find lots of information around how we've looked at sectoral cuts. One of the things we try to do is work with local areas, looking at where there are niches and how we can reveal better the data. So going back to the presentation we just heard, there are problems with data in a whole range of areas, particularly when you try and get down into niches. What we're interested in doing is how can you cut below the kind of high-level sectoral cuts that can be done into something that's a bit more nuanced. And again, so part of what we've been doing with Opportunity Peterborough on this project, and the report that my colleague Andrea will present on in more detail, is part of trying to tease that out. We do a whole range of stuff. These are just a couple of examples of maps that form a small part of a couple of reports that we do. We do have this breadth of data to try and understand what's happening where and where opportunities sit. We've done something on what we call the innovation ecosystem and the innovation environment. Those are not quite arbitrary splits. They basically look at things where we think there are local levers in the ecosystem that you can apply programs and funding to make things shift, and those areas which are a little bit more fundamental. What you're trying to do with that is show the different contexts and the different textures of different areas. Don't look at that in too much detail, but there's a whole raft of evidence that sits behind these things. We've got here, for example, the knowledge transfer partnerships piece is about the connection between universities and businesses. And what we see is we've looked at uptake, and then the little purple line is about who's working locally. So one of the things we're interested in is how do you galvanise local connections into universities, and how do you drive local business growth. It shows quite interestingly that the Knowledge Transfer Partnership Programme, which provides that linkage, is delivered right across the country, but not necessarily locally. So we see that as a sort of potential opportunity to build around some of the local expertise, as an example. Now, I will be handing over to Andrea, and I'm basically here to bask in the glory of the work that she's done. That's my main role this morning. We worked with OP because of this expertise that Peterborough has in the sustainable agenda and in the work it's done in the environment. What we've always been talking about is trying to ID these opportunities and where there are real capabilities. And we know that the Future City programme we've heard about, the work that Peterborough City Council has done, is something that's really strong and local to this area. So we're trying to, basically we were challenged by OP, we think we're good at this, we have no way of showing it, what can you do? So what we have said with the report we've looked at is that circular economy is galvanising that connection between businesses and policymakers. and I think we can add the research base into that. And again, from a smart specialisation point of view, it is that connection between those three things, bringing government, business, and the academic community working together, that we start to see real new opportunities spring up, and the new opportunities for growth and impact that come around that. So what we've seen in existing strategic economic plans is that most LEPs are interested in some way or form in the circular economy, and some are working directly in that. You'll see in the industrial strategy, or those who are aware of the industrial strategy, that it makes direct reference to the circular economy, and that the burgeoning local industrial strategies provide an opportunity to start to galvanise and move circular economy and embed it in the way that places are looking to grow. So I would, for referring back again to what we heard earlier, that there is, circular economy is an emerging opportunity. There's a relatively limited amount of data, and we're always find that difficult, that we are limited to what data we can find. And I think we've already explored that our data set might be enhanced by some of the contacts we've made with the other speakers here today. But what we look to do is to try and map and benchmark where the existing activity is. We've used an evidence-based, which is as robust as we can make it, based on a certain amount of self-reporting and pre-existing public databases, looking at projects that have been undertaken in circular economy. In that, we've got a range of actors from the public sector, academic base and businesses, and we're looking cross-sector on that as well, so sectoral cut in the work we do. We are currently cleaning up the database, ready for publication, so that will be joining the report on our website shortly. And what we've seen from that in terms of highlights, which hopefully will be pleased here. We see London at the top. We always see London at the top. We tend to dismiss that almost immediately when we talk about local areas. It's always an outlier. But coast to capital, which we've heard some good things about today, about how the report might be useful in a conversation with them, but also Cambridge and Peterborough standing right there at the top as a really strong area in terms of what they're doing in the circular economy. So that's my brief overview. I'll hand over to Andrea to get into more of the detail. Thank you.
So that's a pretty good introduction to all that. Just a little bit of an overview of how circular economy has grown in terms of its investment. The first InnovateUK investment for circular economy projects started in 2009, actually. This data comes from Horizon 2020 and UKRI databases. Most of the investment has come from the EU contribution, and the way that we found these numbers was just sort of searching those databases with keywords. I think we actually skipped a slide. Okay. So keywords we used were circular economy, cradle to cradle, and zero waste. Other terms were considered around closed loop systems and sustainable development, but we found that those are sort of very broadly used and not necessarily unique to circular economy projects. The databases that we looked through were the UKRI, InnovateUK databases through G2R, Gateway to Research, Horizon 2020 through the Cordis database. We use the CE100 database from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Circular Economy Club initiatives list. Zero Waste Scotland has an investment fund with projects, and then we also contacted business in the community, the Northern Ireland branch, because they've got a circular economy network. The limitations of this, we realize we don't have every single project. Not every organization necessarily identifies themselves as circular economy. And yeah, so we looked at the organization sort of description, or like how they identify themselves. We looked at their title. Basically, if it had circular economy or any of those keywords in anywhere on their website, that's what came up. And one of the limitations with that is it doesn't really tell us anything about the level of engagement with circular economy, if they have an initiative that they're doing within their company, or if they're fully circular business model. So that does lead to a bit of variability, but in terms of just sort of surfacing people that are interested or aware of it, this is kind of how we approach that. So back to this graph. Clearly an upward trend. The 2008 data, there was a bit of a lag, but it's positive that over the last sort of 5 years, that investment has grown, and investment from Horizon 2020 and UKRI is it's more than 360 pounds, it's 360 million pounds, so that is very positive. So this shows the sort of distribution of different actors across the UK. Commercial organizations were sort of private businesses. University departments we thought was a more it was more interesting than just universities because different university departments are doing different things, whether it's in manufacturing or sort of more environmental studies or even financial economic departments, research institutes, and then others were things like NGOs and sort of regional planning offices. So the sort of proportions were a little bit different across the countries within the UK, but it's sort of that big chunk that's mostly private or commercial organizations, followed by university departments, and then other and research institutes there. And that most of the organizations we identified were in England, followed by Scotland, and then Wales and Northern Ireland had the same sort of numbers, but part of that also comes from the types of organizations that were identified there. For sector categories, we adopted these from the Circular Economy Club initiatives list, which I think came out of an event that happened in February of 2018. They had a big mapping exercise. So cities was kind of the biggest group. I think it came in around 31% of all the organizations identified, which were things like infrastructure and logistics planning. The next biggest group was manufacturing. It's a bit hard to tell with the map because some of the points overlap, but that was things like equipment, furniture, paper and plastics. Consumer products and electronics were next. Food and beverages, others, so financial, professional, healthcare service and education, and then fashion and textiles. For regional comparisons, Ross mentioned a lot of this already, but at LEP level, we looked at strategic economic plans. The top 5 LEPs and London made up over 55% of all of the organizations we were able to identify. Scotland and Wales have national policies in place that are specifically on circular economy, and then Northern Ireland, while it doesn't have a specific national program, it does have certain city regions that are directly engaged in building circular economy networks in those towns and cities. So this is a comparative by LEP in the sectors that they have. So as Ross said, London was the biggest and widest spread, followed by Coast to Capital, and then Greater Cambridge and Peterborough. And I think, as I said, the sort of top 5 LEPs made up more than 50%, including London, but yeah, so it's kind of hard to tell, but a more detailed analysis of this is in the report. But when we compared by business intensity, which was only the commercial businesses divided by the total number of businesses identified in the House of Commons, I can't remember the name of the report, but it was a 2018 report on business statistics. Coast to Capital jumps up to the top. It's only a small percentage of the total businesses that are involved in circular economy, but London drops to 6th. Tees Valley, Gloucestershire, and the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority all move up. So that's interesting. And then we did the same thing with the devolved administrations, looking at the spread of different sectors across the devolved administration. Scotland has the widest spread, which kind of makes sense. We attributed that to the robust policy and business support services there. Wales and Northern Ireland, we identified 31 organizations each there. We know that there are more in Wales, but we were unable to surface a specific data set there. But we know that there's a towards zero waste investment fund that's being launched there this year, so we expect there will be more data available soon. With Northern Ireland, because most of our data from there came from the business and the community circular economy network, a lot of those are in the financial sector through their circular offices initiative, which I think is why the other section there is a bit bigger. But it matches the same trend where cities, manufacturing, food and beverages are kind of the top sectors there, which is similar with the rest of England. And then we did the business intensity there. Northern Ireland was kind of surprising in being the biggest one there, but I think it is that same because of the types of businesses that we identified and because they had sort of more of an initiative rather than their whole business model being circular. That's why they kind of come out on top. And these numbers, the decimal's in the wrong spot. It should be 0.0018. Yeah. So as Ross said, part of our remit with the Smart Spec Hub is linking universities with their local areas. So we were looking at the universities that had over 5 departments active in circular economy projects. So in England, that was Cranfield University, Imperial College, and the University of Brighton. In Scotland, it's the University of Strathclyde, and then in Wales, Cardiff. The main research topics were having to do with cities, manufacturing, and other, being economic programs. I think total we identified 162 university departments across the UK, which is a little bit hard to tell with these points, but yeah. And then for next steps, we want to expand our search terms to include more unique combinations. We know that there's a lot having to do with closed loop systems and engineering, but a lot of that came up as being closed loop circuits, which isn't what we were looking for. So maybe combining different search terms, also adding more data sets from the different regional areas that have already done mapping activities, and then just also more organization-specific research where, do they have an initiative or is their whole model circular? That's a huge amount of variability in terms of how an area is doing. And then lastly, it's not up there, but just sort of making that data more available. We need to clean up our data set and make that publicly open for everybody. So that is that. If anybody has questions, I can.